These are in listen-only mode.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending upon where you're calling in from. My name is Becky Robinson, and I'm so thrilled that you've joined me and my special guest, Flip Brown, for today's webinar. We're going to be talking about how work-life balance is dead and how to live well anyway on the job. I'm calling in today from my office in Lambertville, Michigan, and Flip from his home office, complete with absolutely cool guitars in Vermont. Welcome, Flip.
Thank you, Becky. Glad to be here.
So before we get started today, I want to let you know about a few things and also help you get familiar with our technology. The first thing I want to let you know is that we will share a PDF of Flip's slides to add value for you after this event, and I'll send those in a follow-up email first thing tomorrow, along with the link to the recording of this webinar. The second thing I want to let you know is that throughout this event, we are going to pause the conversation in order to have some questions related to the topics that Flip's going to share with us. So I want to invite you to use the question panel throughout the event to share those questions, which I'll discuss with Flip at the appointed times. And we're really looking forward to having a great and engaged conversation with you today. The other thing that I'd like to invite you to do is to live tweet during this webinar. You're going to notice that Flip has at the bottom of the screen his Twitter handle, FlipBrownVT for Vermont, so we all remember where he is, and the hashtag balanced effectiveness. Alternatively, we did offer in the chat panel the hashtag Flips Tips. So if you like that and you can say it 3 times fast, Flips Tips, you can also add that hashtag to your tweets as well. As we get started, to get you familiar with the question panel, what I'd love to invite you to do is to say something to me, and if possible, why don't you share what motivated you to join on this event today? We would love to hear from you. Get you familiar with the question panel so that you can ask questions at the right time. So if you want to take a quick moment, try out the question panel and let us know what motivated you to attend today's event. So Flip, tell me what motivated you to present this event.
Well, Becky, this is an outgrowth of the book, Balance Effectiveness at Work, How to Enjoy the Fruits of Your Labor Without Driving Yourself Nuts. And I'm just aware that so many people that I work with, they have this struggle about how to move through the day with some sort of grace and style. And it's just a subject that really interests me and something that I both practice and struggle with at times myself. So just thought it would be fun to look at some of these things that I've collected along the way and share those with others to be of service.
I know that we're going to get some tremendous value from this conversation. Before we jump in, I'll share just a few comments that are coming in. Paula says, we're at work so much, we might as well consider it better or good. Gary said that he liked the interesting title. Eileen is looking for ways to have a better life. Sarah is looking to help her staff. Karen says that for most of us, true balance is impossible. Let's see, Jenny says she's been discussing the Venn diagram of work, life, and family. And Joseph wants to feel better about work when he's with his family and family when he's at work. And my friend Paul says, I said, come or else. I don't remember that. Another friend said, work-life balance is all about and is really interested in seeing what tips you have. So lots of great responses, probably not time to name them all, but here's another comment that I like. Balance is a choice. So I imagine we're going to talk something about choices today. Cindy would like to have a life outside of work. So really already some engaging conversation happening, and thank you so much to everyone for trying out the question panel. I want to take a quick moment to introduce you to our expert today, Flip Brown, even though I always want to call him Flip Wilson. Anybody else? So Flip Brown, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Flip. Flip is the founder of Business Culture Consultants, which works toward real sustainable workplace change. Lots of information here about Business Culture Consultants, founded in the year 2000 with over 150 clients, a certified B Corp, serving as a catalyst for good people and great organizations. And Flip is the author of this amazing and wonderful book, Balanced Effectiveness at Work. It's a resiliency manual for anyone who works for a living, and it includes over 28 endorsements, and even Marshall Goldsmith, who's joined us in the past on these events. And we'll talk more at the end of this session about how you can connect with Flip or with his book. But for now, Flip, I'm going to turn this over to you. And I'll be back with you for some questions later.
Thank you so much, Becky. I really appreciate all your efforts in working with me on this webinar. And hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. I'm hosting this from my home office and music studio, in part because it's more quiet here than my downtown Burlington office, and my broadband is better. But also, to me, the music, if we are not balanced when we play music reasonably so, we're not so effective. And for those of you who may be on the webinar who know me, I thought I would just hold this up. There's probably a lot of glare here, but this is me about 37 or 38 years ago with that guitar up there. So a little historical reference there. So work-life balance is dead. Here's the secret. Might as well get this right out in the beginning. Of course, people may say, now I've got the secret, I can leave the webinar. But I really feel that our life should be in work, not separate, although work should be different from life. So I'm on this crusade to eliminate this phrase, actually, work-life balance, because it assumes that we have work and we have life. But all of us want work that has meaning and fulfillment. And so often we strive to find the tools, the sort of external tools that will help us with this balance. And you know what? Probably no surprise to most of you, this is an internal rather than external process. You know, in the old days, we had these day runners, day timers, these little paper things with, you know, tabs and stuff, and now there's all sorts of software programs, but none of that works if it's not an internal process. So how you see, hold, and talk to yourself is key in this process. And you know, it's just a given that other people are not necessarily going to get it. You know, we try to have our coworkers, supervisors, employees, families, friends understand what we need in terms of this balance and this process, but we all have our own unique needs and approaches and stressors, so you got to kind of let that go that everyone will understand. And of course, there is no done. It's just always a continual process. You know, one of the things about writing this book is that sometimes I will get a little frustrated or knotted up, as I call it, and my wonderful wife will say, you know, maybe you should go back and read chapter 16. I'm like, darn it, I shouldn't have given her a copy. So my first tip is that what you do is not who you are. Now, I can't imagine having to go look in either printed or online want ads to see if my interests and capabilities and passions would actually fit into one of these little boxes. And those of you who are in the HR field and you know have to create these little boxes to get people to apply, you know how challenging that is. But the point is, career is only a role. It is not who we are. So that many of us get good at doing things. Sometimes we get good at doing things we don't really want to do, but this competency of being skilled at work, of providing value, of you know being in a leadership or management role, that's not our core identity. Hopefully, that we have something deeper, more grounded, more profound. And I have the good fortune of working with a lot of mission-driven organizations, multiple bottom-line businesses, nonprofits, who are truly trying to make a difference. But sometimes saving the world becomes part of our identity, and that can complicate the finding the balance, because there are just millions of unmet needs out there, as you know. So that ideally, work serves our life and not the reverse. I understand that, and certainly there's been periods in my life where I needed to trade my time and energy for financial return. And there wasn't much more than that. And I have tremendous compassion for people who that really is their only option. And in that case, the work is serving their life from a financial standpoint. But for most of us, we want meaning and fulfillment in our work. But there's also a potential shadow side with that. And that is when we're looking for meaning and fulfillment, we can sometimes want or need validation from the workplace. And if that is too much or in the wrong way, or they just don't understand me, or I'm not being seen or heard, and that's adding to my tension on a daily basis, that's a tough place to be, but we do have some options around that. So I'm fond of this phrase in the Eastern philosophies of right livelihood, where the work that you're doing is not doing harm in the world. You're getting compensation that enables you to live in this world, and that it is in alignment with your being, maybe even your spiritual being. So that's number one. Number two, it's just amazing to me how often we can have this negative internal stance. And I went to a workshop once where I was asked to write down all the negative things I'd ever said or thought or felt about myself, and I was pretty surprised how much was living in there. So you have to watch these negative internals, because I would assume that everyone on this webinar sets high standards for themselves. You want to do a good job, you want to be accurate, timely, you want to connect well with people, and that's good. But then no one is as hard on us as we are. It's just remarkable how we set ourselves up for this, and that's something that if you can bring that in your conscious awareness and have some strategies to be as kind to yourself as you would to others, that can be helpful. The other thing that sometimes happens is that our internal judgment is conditional. Well, if I get this done, or if the supervisor or owner likes my work, or if I get this much done in this amount of time, then I can feel okay about myself. And that's, again, another subconscious setup. We also, and I do this too, we hold on to a someday myth. Someday I'll get organized. Someday I won't be so far behind on my bookkeeping. Someday I'll spend more time with my kids. I'll ski or snowboard more. I'll play more music. But now is really what we have. And as a part of that, I think this idea that we practice radical self-acceptance, because all of us have a fundamental basic goodness that none of this work stress can really get to our core goodness. We just forget that from time to time. Number three, have appropriate vulnerability. So, in the old days, not too long ago, this was not part of the business lexicon. And certainly the work of Brene Brown and others, we now see this openness as a sign of strength. And that growth sometimes comes from us getting information that challenges our own view of ourselves. I was once told that I was not a good listener, and my first internal response to that, thank goodness I didn't say it, was, you got to be kidding me. I studied this stuff. I can tell you the components of active listening. But it actually was a situation where I had been talking about the future work and not the present, and that was interpreted as not listening well. It was very helpful information. So if we have power and authority without vulnerability, it's cold and distant. We don't like to work for or with people who claim to have their compost completely together. And this vulnerability is, I think, a key ingredient of leadership at any level. But on the other hand, if it's too loose and we have poor boundaries, then that doesn't work either. Now, sometimes when clients will talk to me about issues of wanting to put on a buzz, or they feel like they've had some addictive behaviors, if it's appropriate, I don't mind sharing with them that I had 19 years of world-class substance abuse. And thankfully, the best gift I've ever given myself to move through that and and end that and talk to some good people. And it's been 26 years since I said goodbye to that. But if I met a new client and said, you know, there's something you need to know about me, I used to get messed up every day. They go, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. So we have to balance, again, being open and having some boundaries. So those are the first 3 tips. Let's pause. Becky, any questions from our wonderful attendees? I think Becky's on mute.
Sorry about that. Just took me a few seconds. I think we need to invite some questions at this point. And I have a question for you while we're waiting for folks to get their typing fingers ready. I'm really thinking about this issue of what you do is not who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So if what you do is not who you are, then would you have any advice for people about how to define your identity if it's not in what you do? And actually, our friend David Schmaltz just asked a very similar question to the one that was on my mind. If I'm not what I do, who am I supposed to be?
Right. Well, if you imagined going out into the wilderness and you had just the essentials for survival there, then you would find that you can move through an environment like that without any reference to a job, a career, something like that. And often when we're in a real service mode, we volunteer, or someone is in a very difficult situation, physically, mentally, socially, and we just help them out of the goodness of our heart. That's a core element of who we are that has nothing to do with job title, career skills, work history, financial compensation. So I think the career, the job, it's almost like a suit or a dress or a persona that we are very comfortable in many cases stepping into, but there's still more to us than just that. So it's just a matter of consciousness. Where are the places where it resonates for me who I am with what I do? Where are the places where it may not? And if I had no job career, what would that look like and feel like?
Got it. So here's a follow-up, I think, from Eileen, and then some other really excellent questions that I want to make sure that we get to. But Eileen mentions, you know, when you're in a job interview and the question is about, tell me about yourself, her instinct is that they want to hear about the work. Is that correct? And, you know, how do we manage that? You know, because the world or the workplace tells us that we are what we do. How do we separate ourselves from that?
Well, I'm thinking about the old line, choose your parents carefully and choose your employer carefully. So I think there's a difference between a kind of reductionistic, you know, give me the nuts and bolts version of what you've done, because the old model is the job description and the resume have to match. But the new model is we want people with talent and passion. If I'm playing with other musicians and all they ever play is jazz or all they ever play is blues, well, we'll have some fun, but I prefer to play with musicians who are versatile and can move through different songs and genres and tempos. So I would answer that question by saying, do you want to know what my passion is, or do you want to know what my history is? Because I'm happy to talk about either one.
Yeah, that's a really great clarification to make in an interview setting. Thanks for that, Flip. So I love this question from Terrence. He is wondering, are there any best practices for setting the boundaries on how vulnerable we are professionally? Because it seems like there's a thin line between being transparent and sharing too much. And oh my goodness, I have the same feeling. So anything you can share on that would be really helpful.
Well, we're actually, that's good, ESP, because we have a slide coming up on boundaries. So maybe I'll defer, and if I don't answer it specifically during that time, you can ping me again. How's that?
Okay, super. And just a comment here from Elizabeth that she's really glad that you spoke about openness and boundaries about what's shared with others. She agrees. So here's a question from Paula, wondering about this question of work-life balance. And she's mentioning that a lot of this dialogue that's happened around work-life balance has to do with women who are working moms versus stay-at-home moms. Now, I'm not sure you want to tackle this, but she's wondering, do you see it differently for mothers versus fathers and women versus men?
I would say both genders get a raw deal. In other words, men who want to stay home with kids, there's a lot of stigma around that. And women who want to create whatever balance of time and energy, it's a rare employer, it's a rare culture that will work with that situation, again, without judgment, without negativity, or without compromising one's future. So we could do a whole nother webinar on ideal workplace cultures for work-life balance, but we would have to add an extra hour. We can't do that.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the kind way with which you handled that. And I think it goes back to what you said about choose your parents, choose your employer carefully to find a workplace that will nurture what matters to you. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
there's a ton of conversation here. Do we have time for another question now, or do we need to move on?
We should probably move on, and then I'll try to move a little quicker through the slides, and we'll open up more time for questions. How's that?
Sounds good. I'm going to turn my camera back off and turn it back to you.
Okay. Thanks, Becky, and thanks everyone for your great interactive questions. So, excuse me, tip number 4, emotional reactivity as a tool. What do I mean by this? Well, reacting to our reactivity. We all have times when we lose it. I do, and we all do. And sometimes losing it is not spiking in anger or frustration. Sometimes losing it is simply withdrawing, shutting down, being unavailable. But if we can have an awareness in the moment of our reactivity, this creates options. And one thing that is really counterintuitive and has taken me a long time to figure out and to try to practice a little better, those who push our buttons teach us. What do I mean by that? Well, if we can manage our own reactivity, we have, again, more options. Now, currently my favorite role model for leadership and management is Obi-Wan Kenobi from the Star Wars series, because there's a great scene where he and Luke Skywalker, they come up to the gates, big stone or metal gates, and there's the stormtroopers there. Conventional wisdom says there's no way they're going to get through. And Obi-Wan simply says, you will allow these two to pass. And the gates open up because he's so clear about principle and he has no reactivity about this potentially dangerous situation. A lot of times if we have people that we trust and we can get some mirroring from them, we can see ourselves in ways that it's helpful. And again, we may not be able to see how we're reacting in the moment. And these patterns never go away, just that if we practice over time, they have less grab. So it's like, oh, right, here it is again. I know this, I can do this differently. Number 5, expect the unexpected. And to me, this one, I'm just amazed at how a lot of folks, they commute to work in the morning, they're making this mental sticky note in their head of the 3 to 5 things they're absolutely going to get done today. These are important, urgent things. They commute home at the end of the day and they go, darn it, not only did I not get those 3 to 5 things done, I added 2 or 3 more to the list, and the cycle starts again. So basically, you can never totally predict your day. You can get that one phone call or email at 9:05, and then the whole rest of the day is going to be different. So we have this attachment to what should be. I got 8 hours or 9 hours, and I got this much work, and I can make this happen. Well, you know, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans, as Mr. Lennon said. So if you get swept along and you feel like the day's getting away from you, what does it take for you to stop, to recenter yourself? And that one of the biggest gains is when we carve out time for what is important but not necessarily urgent. Because if we don't do that, then those things just don't get our attention. And the question is, what is the best use of your energy right now? Sometimes if we stop and ask ourselves that question, we might be surprised at the answer. So as previously referenced, limits and boundaries serve us because they define things. No one will necessarily set them for us, right? And I think this is an important distinction. We can set boundaries around tasks, or we can set boundaries around relationships. Now, I know what you're saying. I don't have any ability to set boundaries around tasks. Well, I think that when we start to look at how can we specify and clarify the expectations that we and others have around the work, sometimes that can generate more space or more boundaries. And with relationships, sometimes we need to channel or I would say right-size conversations that aren't particularly helpful. We have to sometimes take a risk to do that in order to be of service to the work. So I'm really fond of this idea of focus time, where I knew somebody who had they had a nameplate that would slide in and out on their door, and they had engraved on the other side, in work session. They would turn off their email, turn off their voicemail, the phone, put in work session. No one would bother them. They would have an hour once a day to truly focus on getting what was important done. So you might want to try that. Sometimes we think that no one else can do it like we can do it. No one else understands it like we can. No one else is going to do it, so we do it. And that puts us potentially in the martyr category. So sometimes we need to master the art of limited conversation. I've had to train myself that if someone calls me and says, "Hey, Flip, do you have a minute?" That's actually just a figure of speech. They're not actually asking if I have 60 seconds. And so what I have to say is, well, if you need, particularly if I have to then be somewhere or I have an upcoming appointment, if this is going to require a yes or no answer from me, I probably do have a minute. But if you need to explain something, we need to have a conversation, and then there's some sort of decision or outcome, that could be 10 or 20 minutes. I actually don't have that time now, but let's take this minute to find that time. And boy, it keeps me from getting into that, oh no, this is going on too long. So just a couple tips there. Number 7, take a break. Doesn't that look nice? Wouldn't you like to be sitting there right now? So, when I grew up in my dad's independent grocery store, between 9:30 and 11, and then again from like 1:30 to 4, we could actually go to the coffee room and drink a soda, although in the Midwest it's pop, right, Becky? And, we actually got paid to not work, with the idea that we would be more focused and it would be better for safety if we did that. But we're now in this 24/7 culture, so we forget whether we're a human being or a human doing. There's some very interesting studies lately that show that if you get out in nature, it actually changes how your brain processes information. So I'll even bundle up in the middle of the Vermont winter and go for a walk in the middle of the day because it just does something for me that sitting in my office and turning my chair on so I don't look at the computer for 10 minutes, it's a fundamental difference there. So I encourage you to get out. And we're screen addicts, or we're screen zombies sometimes. So where are the opportunities? We've all seen those commercials and laughed at them, with the family around the table texting to each other. So make sure that when you take a break, sometimes you invest in real conversations with real people. And then we now have this new concept of the digital detox, where we want to make sure that we plan times where we completely unplug. It's been an effort, but I have every year now a ritual of 7 full days of no voicemail, email, internet, news. It's just me and what is going to happen during that day. And my body, about the middle of the second day, goes, really? No incoming? No to-do list? We get to relax? It's called a real vacation. But when you ask folks, particularly 35 or younger, when's the last time you went 48 hours without any digital connectivity? Sometimes they'll look at you like, well, why would you ask that question? Because there are natural rhythms in life and nature that technology basically does not respect. So there's another 3 slides. Let's open it back up, Becky. see what people are curious about.
I absolutely will. And before I do that, Flip, if I could ask you to move your cell phone from wherever it's vibrating. That sound has been distracting for some folks,
Oh,
and they've been asking me.
well, yes. What's happening is there's tweets coming in like crazy, and
Aha.
I will just rely on the computer timer and not this.
Yeah, sorry about that. So lots of comments and questions coming through, and I didn't want to distract you from the core content. However, enough people mentioned it. So I want to go back to a question from the first segment of the slides. Diane was wondering how one can shift from a negative internal stance and remain realistic enough to achieve something. And I thought that was a really important question that I wanted to cover.
Well, I think that the negative internal stance is based on an old conceptual model. You know, we're not good enough, or we're not good enough yet, or until we do the right things. I really encourage people to do the deep work to examine why that's there and why it serves them. And there's many different ways to do that. Certainly having some sort of practice. In other words, when we go to a yoga class, it doesn't work well when we go, oh man, my downward facing dog really sucks today. You're just no good at this yoga stuff. You know, we tend to suspend our judgment in that setting. So we can do it, it just takes practice.
Got it. Okay, thanks for that. So Jane mentions here, Flip, that limits and boundaries are the hardest for her. And at what point can we or should we stop allowing people to interrupt our office hours? Can you give some advice about that?
Well, it's both a cultural thing, but it's also the idea that we can have conversations to say, I want to be available to you, and so these are the times that I will be most available to you, because when you need something from me or you need to have a business conversation with me, I want to make sure that I give you my full attention. That's challenging to do on an interruption basis versus on, you know, from 9 to 10, I'm completely open. From 10 to 11, I'm doing focus work. I'm open again from 11 to noon. Then I'm going to take a lunch break. You know, if we put some structure to it, there will be people who don't understand. There will be people who may need reminders about that. But I think we can ask them, we can actually both ask them to respect our needs, but we can also generate a benefit to them by doing so.
Sure. Well, so some follow-up on that. Steve said that he loves the idea of the in-session name placard outside the office. And I actually have that happening right now. I have a do not disturb sign on both my doors because I have two doors to my office. But how can we make sure that that in-session doesn't stay all the time? And how can we make sure that we remain open enough? So
Well,
Steve is
yes,
fearing that that would become a habit for him. You know, he puts do not disturb or in-session on the door, and then no one ever gets to see him again.
right, because the thing is, we can't become isolationist, and you know, some of us are more introverted and we want or need more quiet focus time. Others of us thrive on the interaction. So, you know, there's some calibration there. But I think that part of that is getting feedback from others in terms of how's this working for you. I'm trying this new experiment. Does it feel like I've closed myself off? You know, there's an app on the phone, which I've shut off, thank you very much for everyone's feedback, that will actually monitor how many times a day you check your phone. It's ridiculous, for me at least, and so I've really tried to place my own limits on that, and so I think that it may take more than one or two conversations, but over time, hopefully people will understand.
So I have two people here with the same question about what do you do when you're in an open office? How do you put a do not disturb sign when you're in an open workspace that's filled with other people and noise and all of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that, and I think organizations like Google and some others are rethinking this. We're all open, we're all accessible, because from a neurological basis, we don't do that well. We're not actually naturally wired for multitasking. So I think there's always the question of earbuds or headphones. Sometimes those can close people off. Sometimes they can give them the quiet and the space they need. Those are frequently negotiations. But I came across one woman in a so-called cubicle farm who had a lava lamp. And when she turned the lava lamp on, it meant that she was doing, because she was in accounting and she needed to make sure she added things up, and there were certain periods of time where distractions would cause her to have to do the whole list over again. So she turned the lava lamp on and people would go, oh, and they would come back later. Again, you can't keep it on for 6 out of 8 hours necessarily, but some means to signal your team that I'm in focus zone, even if you don't have a door that closes.
That's a great thing. So I think after this webinar, there's going to be a run on lava lamps on eBay because we're all going to be trying to find one. So here's an interesting comment that came through. I think everyone really is interested in this idea of the digital detox. Jan said that she has some students with her. I don't know if they're also listening to the webinar or, and she polled them, and only 11 out of 17 said they'd refrain from their tech for a day, and the reasons were they're grounded, they have no Wi-Fi, but no one is saying that it's just because, and these are high school students.
Yep.
So I think that you're probably, pretty spot on in your sense that it's difficult. Oh, here's one. So Russ says that he's heard of people having 3 blocks on their desk, red, yellow, and red, so that you could signify whether or not you're open to interruption.
You mean red, yellow, green? Yeah.
Red, yellow, green, yes.
Yeah, great tip.
And Jane says, thanks for the tip. So now we have two tips. And she's mentioning that it's probably better if you let your team know and get some pre-agreements before you try that.
Absolutely, yes. I strongly second that.
Yeah, so then the thing is, once you have those boundaries to the physical interruptions, what about just our own distractions that we create? I know for me, shut down Facebook and Twitter, and we do social media as a company, but it's really hard to shut that off sometimes.
Right. Well, I think that a cultural virus, we might call it, is FOMO, fear of missing out, and it's true. I actually have a colleague, I think, Becky, you know him, Ryan Honeyman, who's now doing an experiment, I think it's in its 2nd month, of he's a consultant and an author, works with a lot of organizations on the B Corp certification. He is now checking his email once a week on Monday afternoons. And his first report was, yeah, there's 2 or 3 things that happened in the course of a week that, you know what, he missed that one. And it was a missed opportunity, or somebody he probably should have gotten back to. But it's clearly in his message, and he reports tremendous freedom. He also has a new daughter, and it's working for him. So that's a very radical concept. My wife, until last summer, did not run her life or her business with an email address. She just didn't have one. So there are folks who live in this world, believe it or not, without this constant connectivity. So you just have to, maybe it's not a detox, maybe it's just a diet. Turn it off for an hour, turn it off for 2, turn it off for a day. See how you feel. See if you have anxiety around that. Play with it.
And I know for me that the most logical time to really detox from digital is on the weekends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because, and actually, I believe this to be true. I haven't independently verified it, but in France they passed a law that employers cannot require their employees to check or respond email between 6 p.m. on Friday and I think it's 8 a.m. on Monday.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So one more question back to that whole topic of the negative self-talk. And a follow-up from the person actually who initially asked the question. So Flip, you said that we never overcome that emotional reactivity. We only allow it less grab as we go on. So do you have any strategies to reduce the grab of that negative self-talk that we experience?
Well, I think that some sort of mindfulness practice can have tremendous benefits, because by definition, we are in a mindfulness practice, whether it's yoga or meditation, and there's many different forms. There's walking meditation, there's hundreds of styles of yoga. In that situation, we are in observer mode. We are actually watching our reactivity. We train ourselves to do that, and then, sneak preview here, a couple more slides, we can practice this art of healthy detachment. So we don't have to be constricted or identified forever with these negative patterns. But it takes the awareness, first of all, that they're happening, and then the second is that we have this option to do it differently. We may need someone to coach us in terms of how to do it differently, but it certainly is possible, and there's, again, neurological research that shows that when you engage in some sort of practice, sorry for the technical difficulties here, it actually changes the structure of the brain to make us even more aware and calm. So, good plug for mindfulness.
Very helpful. So I think if we're going to get through those last 4 points, I need to shut my camera off and turn it back to you.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Becky. So here we go again. Now, tip number 8, a concept of supportive confrontation. I think I made up this phrase, but at any rate, what it means is to be of service by focusing on the principles and values that we share or hold with someone else, even if it's going to initially be a difficult conversation, or there's the risk that it will be a difficult conversation. Most of us, when we think of confrontation, we think it's automatically going to create a negative response. But one of the definitions in the dictionary of to confront is I could present you with information. I could present you with information that you just won the lottery and you would probably not be upset with me. So because we are nervous about the potential negative emotional reaction of the other, we don't say it. We avoid it. We walk on eggshells. And it's that middle path between being too aggressive and too much avoidance. It's a skill that takes practice, but the better we get at it, the more balance it can create for us. So we need to separate our business conversations from our emotional conversations. Both are necessary at times. It makes a huge difference to say to someone, I'm really frustrated in this situation. I just need you to know that because I don't want you to have to guess, and we still need to find a solution. So here are my ideas about that, as opposed to, I can't believe we're talking about this again. I mean, holy cow, how many times do we have to go over this before we find a solution? Then the recipient has to go, wait a minute, do I deal with the frustration first, or do I try to have the business conversation? Obviously, much easier said than done. We don't make it or take it personally. So just have to stay focused on what is important here rather than, again, my emotional reactivity. It may take more than one discussion. A lot of times we kind of, frame the conversation in our mind and we take the risk and we have the courage and it doesn't go well and we're like, oh, well, I tried. I guess it's not going to be different. But sometimes it's multiple engagements. And the improved connection is worth the risk, and sometimes you have to define the risk to get the improved connection. So this is a whole nother webinar, and this is a larger toolbox than I can put on one slide, but the idea is that there are ways to engage in these kinds of conversations that are skill-based. Most of us, myself included, didn't get those skills in either our families or in school. So a lot more depth to this one. As I mentioned, the art of healthy detachment. This is the idea that we are fully and compassionately engaged, but we do not add our own trauma or drama to the situation. And again, we operate from observer mode. Now, I had an opportunity to work with some emergency medical technicians, and this was some time ago, and I've always been known as Mr. Squeamish, so I thought, you volunteered, you get these calls, you go out on the highway, there's this horrible accident, this person's already deceased, this person's kind of banged up, and this person's bleeding profusely. I would lose my lunch and run down the road in the opposite direction, and they don't even get paid for it. And they said, well, we are in service, we are trained, it's the training that kicks in, and you just cannot get emotionally reactive. You cannot add your own feelings of freaking out to that, because you won't be able to help those people. Later on, you may have to process some feelings. So this observer mode, Obi-Wan Kenobi excelled at that, it's hard, but we can practice this, because in the end, all we can do is the best we can do. Sometimes we try to do more than that, but it really doesn't work. So I believe that work should be a vehicle for fulfillment. It hasn't always been that way for me, but I am truly blessed that at this point, the work that I do and get to do, way more often than not has that. Because this meaning and fulfillment matters. If you're not enjoying your work, work on it. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's internal work, there's work in the conversations you have in the team, in the culture, and there's also looking at this alignment of, over the arc of your personal and professional development, what is the next plateau for you? Are you continuing to grow and change and learn and connect and be humble and be delighted and all those wonderful elements that we want to experience in the workplace? Are you in a values-aligned culture? Again, I understand that people, and I myself certainly went through transitions of going, wait a minute, I don't think this matches for me. I don't think that what this organization or company is doing or the way it's doing it, I've kind of outgrown that now. And so very few of us have jobs that last for 10, 20, or 30 years, and there's always some trade-offs, some kind of anxiety about going into the unknown of a new job, career, or culture, but sometimes that's what we need to do. Does work connect you with self and spirit? I believe that ultimately we are all here to be of service to each other, and there's millions of ways to do that, but do you have that congruency, or do you go to work and then come home and try to recover from work? So my wish for all of you is that you experience that now or in the future. Can you change your viewing and doing? I'm frequently amazed by people who work in very high stress environments who are calm cucumbers, because it just doesn't get them. They don't have the sort of the negative Velcro that the stresses of the workplace or the various characters and personalities get to them. They just move through it. And my dear departed mother-in-law had a sign in her kitchen that said, when all else fails, lower your expectations. So I think that we have compressed in an hour here, 48 minutes, what we could talk about for a day or a week, but I would encourage you to continue these conversations with your closest circle. Ask them how they're moving through the stresses of life and work. What are their tips? What's working for them? What can you share and offer them? Because in the end, it's how we spend this precious life energy every day that we want to, more often than not, have a positive experience, positive connections, and a positive internal experience. So that's the 10 tips. And back to you, Becky.
Yes, so I have a few questions that have been coming in, and I want to welcome a few more. And sorry, they're coming so fast that I have to scroll back. So Jan was wondering if you have any solid tips on how to move quickly but gently to the observer mode.
That is a great question, because I think that it's pretty hard to do that when you're in the real depth of reactivity. So you may need to monitor your breathing. You may need to change your physical location, go for a walk. You may need to just, in the middle of a conversation, allow silence to be what happens next. And but the more you practice and the more you ask yourself, am I watching or am I being swept along, you can get better at it over time.
Great, thanks. So here's one from Angela. How can we not make or take it personally when in a supportive confrontation? So Angela says that for her, once the person calls her name as part of the situation, it becomes very personal. So do you have any
Mhm.
suggestions or tips on that, Flip?
Well, I think that we all make a tremendous investment in our work. It's an investment of time, of energy, and of caring. And so when someone questions that, and then we have the internal experience that they're questioning us and who we are and our fundamental value, it goes back to one of those earlier slides. They're talking about their experience, how they experience you, quite frankly, in a limited way. They don't know all the rest of you. They don't know the special relationships that you have. They don't know the people who truly love you and care for you. They're playing out their own drama. They're working through their own unresolved stuff. They're projecting some of that onto you. And the very challenging task, I'll admit this is not easy, is to stay connected with them while you take care of yourself. And so the easiest way to put it, and the most challenging thing to do, is don't take the bait.
Thanks. I agree, it's challenging. So Flip, Michelle is wondering what would be a good action plan to overcome the fear of changing your career because the unknown can be very scary.
Yep. Well, when I still had my last job and I was contemplating being self-employed, it was like, wow, yeah, no structure, no regular paycheck, no benefits. Okay, sure, I'll go for that. As my wife said, I tried to eat my way into my next career. And what she meant by that is I had a ton of lunches and coffee, tea. I would see if I could find the people who appeared to be doing things that I wanted to do, who appeared to have started their own successful coaching and consulting businesses, and said, can I buy you lunch? Can I learn from your experience? And I don't know if anybody actually said no. I do the same thing now. I have folks contact me on a regular basis, and I don't say no. And if they have to buy me lunch only if they're making more money than me, and that's usually not the case. So find those people. A cup of coffee, even at Starbucks, will only set you back, 4 for you, 4 for them. It's pretty affordable for the wisdom that you'll get. So find those folks, talk to them.
That's very helpful. So I'm going to jump back to something earlier in the conversation because Claudia pulled it back up for me and is really curious about your idea of growth coming from disconfirming. Could you speak more about that, please?
Well, I think that the idea here is that we do craft our persona. It's like an elevator speech. We're all supposed to be able to say in 30 seconds who we are and what we do. Well, that can be a useful tool, but it obviously doesn't capture everything. But we have these beliefs about ourselves. And when someone challenges those beliefs, particularly in a way that just is like, really? I mean, that's how you see me? The first response is either to believe that they're correct or to shut down. Excuse me. Marshall Goldsmith, one of my mentors and one of Becky's clients, tells this great story of going in to see a Fortune 100 CEO, and they've been working together for a while, and CEO just takes 10 minutes to just rip Marshall to shreds. This is worthless. I can't believe I'm spending my time and wasting time and money, blah, blah, blah. Marshall just listens, allows the guy to run out of steam, and says, thank you. CEO goes, what do you mean, thank you? I just basically ripped you a new you-know-what. And Marshall said, somewhere in there's some information that will be of value to me. I'm not sure what it is yet because I need to process this, but thank you. And the guy was completely disarmed. So that to me is a great story of he didn't make or take it personally. He just looked for what he could learn from the situation. This takes practice. You can't just flip the switch because the defensiveness is based on, I'll run on a limb a little bit here, it's based on our insecurity. Oh my gosh, what if they are right? What if I'm not as together as I think I am? And that person just magically finds that place of insecurity for us and pushes on it. So it's not about being cocky and egotistical either. It's just about staying centered, which is a practice.
Thanks. And I reached back out to the person who shared that question to see if there's any follow-up needed. I'm going to quickly pause and share some feedback from your friend David Schmaltz and mine. He says,
Okay.
thank you for reminding me that work might well be more the medium than end, a medium in which I might as well do what I do while I'm doing their bidding. So thanks for that comment, David. Here's something from Paul. How do you address when others around you continue to feed the negative drama?
Yeah, that's tough because it's like gossip and innuendo and rumors at work. A lot of times we find ourselves unwittingly hearing that stuff because if we say, you know what, I'm sorry, but I need to ask you to not share that kind of information because first of all, I don't find it helpful or interesting, and secondly, I would not want that information about you or me to be circulated because it has a very negative tone. Now, it's unlikely the other person is to say, wow, thank you, yeah, that's really good. So we have to take that risk. And if it's not worth taking the risk, then we simply have to be okay as we can be in negativity. It's sort of like I've had this experience of being in a dentist chair and I'm trapped. I'm having some major procedure, and the music that they have on, because I can like all music, but some music it's just like, oh please. But I have to somehow find a way to just put that music in a bubble and not let it get to me. So there's another example of the art of healthy detachment. It's not easy, but it's better than fuming in anger or barking at someone.
Well, and I think that story that you shared about Marshall definitely demonstrated the art of healthy detachment, of being able to hear and say thank you and then to process it and see what fits. I think that we're unfortunately out of time. I want to thank everyone who invested their hour with us, and we have actually something special for you. Flip, can you get me to that next slide?
Sure.
We are going to give away 5 copies of Flip's books. If you could please send your feedback to flip.brown@icloud.com by the end of your business day today. Flip's going to draw 5 winners and send a printed copy of his book for free. If by chance you're not one of those lucky 5 winners, I still encourage you to find out more about Flip's book. And in my follow-up, I'll also send this link to Flip's website where you can purchase it, or he recommends that you support your local bookstore or order it from an online retailer like Powell's. Flip would also love to be able to stay in touch to give you more information along the way so you can find out other ways that you might interact with him, either hiring him as a speaker or trainer for your organization. And the best way to stay in touch with Flip is to go to the website balancedeffectiveness.com and sign up for Flip's newsletter. As a reminder, I will be sending these slides out for reference for you for the future, and we'll send you a link to this recording. So thank you, Flip, so much for sharing your wisdom and humor and stories and insights. I know that several people on my team were listening, and so I might see how they feel about the tricks that we discussed related to boundaries. And thank you so much for all the value you've provided to us today, Flip.
Thank you, Becky. And I know we've had many people on this webinar, and again, I appreciate your interest and participation. But if you email me a question, I promise you I will respond. So be happy to connect and add some additional value here. And again, thank you, Becky, and thank you all of you for the opportunity to be of service here.
That's a generous offer, Flip, and I'll include that in our follow-up too. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your Thursday.
Great. Bye, everybody.